Hi there, have you ever felt invisible in your own family? I'm Madison Parker, and at 28, on the morning of my wedding, I sat alone in my hotel room, wearing my dress but shaking with tears. My parents had chosen my brother Blake's promotion party instead of my ceremony, and my best friend, my maid of honor, had just abandoned me after believing the fake text Blake created. No family, no best friend, no one to stand by me. For a moment, I felt completely destroyed, until a sudden knock at the door changed everything. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from, and thanks for being here. I grew up in what looked like the perfect American family in Irvine, California. My parents, Catherine and David Parker, owned a successful real estate company. We lived in a sprawling house with a 3-car garage, took annual vacations to Hawaii, and always had the newest everything. From the outside, we had it all. But inside that picture-perfect house, there was an unspoken hierarchy that I learned about as early as age 5. My little brother Blake was born when I was 4, and from the moment he took his first breath, it was like the sun started revolving around him instead of the actual sun. Blake had these bright blue eyes and this infectious laugh that made everyone in any room gravitate toward him. He was naturally athletic, naturally charming, and naturally the center of attention wherever we went. I was the responsible older sister, the one who got good grades without being asked, who cleaned up her toys without being told, who never caused any trouble. You'd think that would earn me some recognition, right? Wrong. When I made the dean's list 3 semesters in a row during high school, my mother glanced up from organizing Blake's baseball trophies and said, "That's nice, honey. Can you help me polish these? Blake's coach is coming over for dinner." But when Blake scored 2 touchdowns in a single game, we went out to celebrate at the fanciest steakhouse in Orange County. Dad ordered champagne and made a toast to our superstar athlete. I remember sitting there pushing around my overpriced steak, wondering what it would take for them to look at me the way they looked at Blake when he told stories about his game. The pattern continued through everything. My art was a nice hobby, but Blake's sports were his future. When I got accepted to UCLA with a partial scholarship for my portfolio, Mom said, "Well, that'll save us some money." When Blake got recruited to play college baseball, Dad took a week off work to drive him to visit different campuses. But the moment that really broke something inside me happened during my senior year of high school. I had been working for months on a piece for the regional art competition, this massive oil painting that incorporated elements from all the techniques I'd learned over 4 years. I poured my heart into every brushstroke. The exhibition was on the same night as Blake's regional championship baseball game. "You understand, don't you, sweetie?" Mom said when I reminded her about the exhibition for the 3rd time. "Blake's game is really important. This could determine his college prospects." "My art exhibition is important too," I said quietly. "I'm one of only 5 students selected to represent our school." Dad looked up from his newspaper. "Madison, your art will be hanging there all week. Blake's game is one night only." So I stood alone in that gallery, watching other families celebrate their kids' achievements, while mine was 20 miles away cheering for Blake. I won 2nd place that night. When I told them the next morning at breakfast, Mom was already on the phone with Blake's coach discussing summer training schedules. "That's wonderful, honey," she said, holding her hand over the phone. "Put your ribbon somewhere safe." Blake's participation trophy from that same season sits on the mantle in our living room to this day. My award is in a box in my closet. You might be wondering why I didn't just accept that Blake was the golden child and move on with my life. Trust me, I tried. When I left for UCLA in 2016, I told myself that distance would help. I threw myself into my graphic design program, made friends who actually listened when I talked, and started building a life that didn't revolve around earning my parents' approval. That's where I met Jessica Chen, my roommate freshman year. Jessica was a psychology major with this incredible ability to see right through people's facades. She was the first person who ever told me that the way my family treated me wasn't normal. "Maddie," she said after I'd finished telling her about missing yet another family dinner because Blake had an important intramural game. "You know that what you're describing is emotional neglect, right?" I laughed it off. "Come on, Jess, it's not like they beat me or anything. Blake's just more everything." "Being ignored and dismissed is still harmful," she said gently. "Your accomplishments matter just as much as anyone else's." For the first time in my life, Someone was validating feelings I'd been told were selfish or attention-seeking. Jessica became more than my roommate. She became the sister I'd always wanted. She celebrated my small victories, listened to my frustrations, and never once made me feel like I was being dramatic. When I started therapy during my junior year with Dr. Sarah Martinez, she helped me understand concepts I'd never heard of before: emotional neglect, scapegoat dynamics, conditional love. Madison, Dr. Martinez said during one of our sessions, love shouldn't be a competition. In healthy families, there's enough attention and celebration to go around. I started setting boundaries with my family. I stopped calling home every week when they barely seemed to notice. I stopped rushing back for every family gathering where I'd inevitably end up feeling invisible. It wasn't easy. Part of me kept hoping that maybe this time would be different. Maybe this time they'd see me. They didn't. When I graduated UCLA in 2020 with a 3.8 GPA and a job offer at a prestigious design firm in Los Angeles, my parents almost missed the ceremony. Blake had a job interview that same morning, and Dad insisted on driving him there personally to make a good impression. They showed up 20 minutes late, missed my name being called, and left immediately after to take Blake out for a celebratory lunch for his interview. I went to dinner with Jessica and her parents, who had stayed the entire weekend to celebrate both of us. That night, I made a decision. I was done begging for crumbs of attention from people who should have been my biggest supporters. I went low contact with my family. Polite but distant. Holiday visits became shorter. Phone calls became less frequent. I started building my chosen family with friends who saw my worth. And then I met Ryan. It was October 2021, and I was having my first solo art show at this tiny gallery in Venice Beach. I'd been working on these pieces for 2 years, mixed media works that explored themes of identity and belonging. I was nervous as hell, standing in that gallery in my nicest dress, watching people examine my most personal work. Ryan Walsh walked in about halfway through the opening, tall, with kind brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and this rumpled button-down that somehow looked perfectly put together on him. He was a software engineer, but he moved through that art gallery like he belonged there. He stopped in front of my largest piece, a collage I'd titled Invisible, and just stood there for probably 10 minutes, really looking at it. When he finally approached me, he didn't lead with small talk about the wine or the cheese selection. This piece, he said, nodding toward Invisible. It's about feeling unseen in your own family, isn't it? I nearly choked on my wine. How did you know that? Because I can see it, he said simply. The way you layered the family photos underneath all those other images. It's like they're there but not there at the same time. We talked for 3 hours that night. I told him about my family, about Blake, about the constant feeling of not being enough. Instead of giving me the usual "I'm sure they love you" platitudes, Ryan said something that stopped me in my tracks. That's not normal, Maddie. Parents are supposed to celebrate all their kids equally. What you're describing isn't love. It's conditional attention, and you deserve so much better. No one had ever said that to me before. No one had ever looked at my situation and called it what it was: unfair. Our first date was a week later. Ryan took me to this hole-in-the-wall taco place in Santa Monica, and we talked until they literally turned the lights off around us. On our second date, he brought me a small succulent in a hand-painted pot, because I'd mentioned loving plants but being terrible at keeping them alive. Succulents are forgiving, he said with a grin, like the best relationships should be. By our 3rd month together, I knew I was falling in love with him. But it wasn't just Ryan I was falling for. It was his family too. The Walsh family was everything mine wasn't. Ryan's parents, Michael and Ellen, called me regularly just to check in, not because they needed something, not because they were relaying information about Ryan. They called because they genuinely wanted to know how I was doing. "How's your latest project going, sweetheart?" Ellen would ask, and then actually listen to my answer. She remembered details about my work, asked follow-up questions, and celebrated my small victories like they were major accomplishments. Ryan's older brother Marcus, a Marine veteran who could probably bench press a small car, cried when he saw one of my paintings at Ryan's apartment. "This is incredible, Maddie. You're so talented." It was like discovering what family was supposed to feel like. When Ryan proposed in December 2022, he did it at that same gallery where we'd met. He'd arranged with the owner to have a private viewing of a new exhibition, but when we walked in, the walls were covered with every piece I'd ever created. Paintings from college, sketches from high school, even some drawings I'd done as a kid that he'd somehow gotten from my old art teacher. "Madison Parker," he said, getting down on one knee in the center of that room surrounded by my art. "You are the most talented, resilient, beautiful person I've ever known. Will you marry me and let me spend my life celebrating you the way you deserve?" I said yes through tears, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was enough, more than enough. Of course, I had to tell my family about the engagement. I called my parents the next morning, my stomach knotted with that familiar anxiety. "Mom, I have some exciting news," I said when she answered. "Ryan proposed last night." There was a pause just long enough to let me know that their response wasn't going to be what I hoped for. "Oh, that's nice, honey. Congratulations." Her voice was flat, distracted. "Blake just got promoted to senior account manager at his firm, by the way. We're so proud of him. Hold on, Blake, tell Madison about your promotion." And just like that, my engagement announcement became a platform for Blake's career update. Ryan and I decided on a small wedding at a beachfront resort in Newport Beach. 60 guests, intimate and meaningful. We chose the venue because it was beautiful, not because it was expensive. We selected a menu that reflected both our tastes. Everything about our planning process felt collaborative and joyful, except for my family's response. I sent them save the dates in January. Radio silence. I called to confirm they'd received them. "Oh yes, we got them," Mom said. "June 15th, right? We'll try to make it work with our schedules." Try to make it work. For their daughter's wedding. I sent formal invitations in March with a clear RSVP deadline. The deadline came and went with no response from my parents or Blake. When I called again, Dad answered. "Oh, the wedding thing," he said. "Yeah, we'll be there probably. Things are just really busy at work right now." Probably. They would probably attend their daughter's wedding. Meanwhile, Ryan's family was fully engaged in every aspect of the planning. Ellen offered to help coordinate flowers. Michael insisted on contributing to the catering costs, even though Ryan and I had budgeted to pay for everything ourselves. Marcus asked if we needed help with anything: transportation, setup, emotional support. "This is what family does," Ellen told me during one of our planning sessions. "We show up for each other." I kept waiting for my family to show up. I kept believing that surely, for my wedding day, they would prioritize me for once. 3 weeks before the wedding, Blake posted an Instagram story that changed everything. I was scrolling through social media during my lunch break when I saw it. A photo of Blake in a suit, holding up what looked like an official letter, grinning from ear to ear. The caption read, "Just got promoted to senior account manager. Time to celebrate this achievement. Party this Saturday. Can't wait to celebrate with everyone who matters. #promoted, #movings up, #celebration. This Saturday." My wedding was this Saturday. I stared at my phone screen, my turkey sandwich suddenly tasting like cardboard. Blake got a promotion, basically just one step up from his current position, which was fine, great even. But the timing. I scrolled through the comments and found what I was dreading. A comment from my mother. "So proud of my son. Can't wait to celebrate this huge milestone with the whole family on Saturday. This calls for a real party. Saturday, my wedding day." My hands shaking, I called my mother immediately. "Mom, I saw Blake's promotion announcement," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Congratulations to him." "Oh, isn't it wonderful?" she gushed. "Senior account manager, he's worked so hard for this. The company is throwing him a celebration dinner, and then we're having a family party afterward. It's such a big deal for his career." "Mom," I interrupted. "What's this about celebrating on Saturday?" A pause. "Well, Blake wanted to have his promotion party right away while everyone's still excited about his success. He found this perfect venue, and Saturday is my wedding day." Another pause, longer this time. Oh, honey, I thought your wedding isn't it next weekend?" "No, Mom, it's this Saturday, June 15th. You RSVP'd yes 2 months ago." "Well," she said, and I could practically hear her trying to figure out how to make this my problem. "Maybe you could reschedule. Blake has already put deposits down for the venue, and all the family is planning to be there. It would be really difficult to change everything now." I sat in stunned silence. My mother was asking me to reschedule my wedding because my brother had decided to have a promotion party on the same day. Mom, I can't reschedule my wedding. We have 60 guests coming, vendors booked, everything planned and paid for. Well, I don't know what to tell you, Madison. Blake's promotion is really important to the family right now. This could change his whole career trajectory. And my wedding isn't important? The silence stretched between us until she finally said, "Of course it is. But you understand how these things work. Blake's party is going to be such a big celebration for his achievement." After I hung up, I called Jessica immediately. "They want you to reschedule your wedding for Blake's engagement party." Jessica's voice went up 3 octaves. "Maddie, that's insane. That's not normal family behavior. That's deliberate sabotage." But even as she said it, something else was nagging at me. How had Blake chosen the exact same date as my wedding for his engagement party? How had none of them remembered my wedding date when it had been on their calendars for months? The answer came 3 days later in the cruelest possible way. I was at the venue for our final walkthrough when Jessica called. She sounded weird, guilty, and nervous in a way that immediately put me on alert. "Maddie, I need to tell you something, and you're going to hate me." My stomach dropped. "What's wrong?" "I can't be your maid of honor." The words hit me like a physical blow. Jessica had been my maid of honor for over a year. She'd helped me pick out my dress, organized my bachelorette party, and had been more excited about my wedding than my own family. "What do you mean you can't be my maid of honor? Jess, the wedding is in 4 days." I know, and I feel terrible about this. But Blake reached out to me yesterday." "Blake reached out to you? How does Blake even have your number?" "He got it from your mom. He called and explained that there was some kind of miscommunication about the dates, and that you'd told the family you didn't really want them at your wedding anyway. He said you'd only asked me to be your maid of honor because you felt obligated, but that you'd found someone else you were closer with now." I felt like the ground was shifting beneath my feet. "Jessica, none of that is true. I never said any of those things." He showed me text screenshots, Maddie. Messages from you saying that you thought I was trying too hard to be part of your life, and that you'd rather have someone more sophisticated as your maid of honor. "Those texts are fake," I said desperately. "Jess, you know me. You know I would never say anything like that about you." But I could hear the doubt in her voice when she replied, "I don't know what to believe anymore." Blake seemed really sincere, and he was just trying to save me from embarrassment. He thought it would be better if I came to his engagement party instead of showing up to your wedding where I wasn't really wanted. "So you're choosing Blake's party over my wedding?" I think it's better this way. I'm sorry, Maddie. I really am." She hung up, and I stood in that beautiful venue, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. My family had abandoned me, and now my best friend, the person I'd counted on to stand beside me, had been turned against me too. That night, I called Ryan and told him everything through tears. "This is intentional, Maddie," he said, his voice tight with anger. "Blake didn't just happen to pick your wedding date for his party, and those fake text messages? This is psychological warfare." "But why would he do this to me? I've never done anything to hurt him." "Because he can't stand the idea of you being the center of attention for one single day," Ryan said. "Even on your wedding day, he needs to make sure he's the star." Ryan offered to postpone the wedding, but I refused. I wasn't going to let Blake win. I wasn't going to let my family's dysfunction ruin the most important day of my life. But on the morning of my wedding, as I sat alone in my hotel room with no maid of honor and no family coming to see me get married, I wondered if I was strong enough to get through the day. That's when there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find Marcus, Ryan's older brother, standing there in his dress uniform, holding a cup of coffee and a small bouquet of roses. "Reporting for maid of honor duty, ma'am," he said, with a solemn salute that made me laugh despite everything. "Marcus, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do," he interrupted. "Nobody gets left behind on my watch. I've got your coffee, I've called the hair and makeup team to confirm they're still coming, and I've prepared a speech about what an amazing woman you are in case anyone needs reminding today." Marcus, this tough Marine veteran who could probably arm wrestle a bear, spent the morning of my wedding braiding tiny flowers into my hair and making sure I ate something substantial before the ceremony. "You know what the best part about the military is," he said as he helped me into my dress. "You learn that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when things get tough. Today you're getting married into a family that will always show up for you." When it was time to walk down the aisle, Ryan's father, Michael, offered me his arm. "It would be my honor to walk you down the aisle, sweetheart," he said. "If you'll have me," I nodded, not trusting my voice to stay steady. The ceremony itself was beautiful. The venue looked exactly how we'd envisioned it, with white roses and eucalyptus garlands framing the ocean view. Our guests, all 60 of them, were smiling and crying and celebrating our love. But I couldn't ignore the glaringly empty front row on my side. The space where my parents should have been sitting, where Blake should have been standing as one of Ryan's groomsmen, felt like a physical presence in its absence. When Ryan and I exchanged vows, his voice broke as he promised to love you unconditionally, celebrate your victories as my own, and create a family where your worth is never questioned. He'd written those vows specifically for me, knowing what I'd been through. The reception was everything we'd dreamed of. Ryan's extended family filled the room with warmth and laughter. His aunts and uncles made sure to include me in every conversation. His cousins taught me family drinking songs. And his grandmother spent 20 minutes showing me embarrassing photos of Ryan as a baby. "You're ours now," Ellen whispered as we danced. "And we take care of our own." But as we were cutting the cake, that moment I'd imagined sharing with my family since I was a little girl, my phone started buzzing incessantly against my hip. Ryan noticed me flinch as it vibrated for probably the 15th time in 10 minutes. "Just check it," he said quietly. "If it's an emergency, we need to know." I pulled out my phone to find 42 missed calls from my mother and a text that made my heart stop. "Madison, call me now. Emergency." Against my better judgment, I stepped outside to a quiet corner of the venue's garden and called her back. She answered on the first ring. "Madison, oh thank God. We've been trying to reach you for hours." "I was getting married, Mom. You know, the wedding you chose not to attend." "Listen to me," she said, her voice frantic and tearful in a way I'd never heard before. "Blake's engagement party. It's falling apart. Emma called off the engagement right in the middle of the party. She found out what Blake did to you." My heart started pounding. "What do you mean, what Blake did to me?" "The text messages, Madison. Blake showed us fake text messages from you saying you didn't want us at your wedding. He told us you'd said we were too embarrassing for your sophisticated Los Angeles friends. He made us believe that you'd uninvited us because you were ashamed of us." I sank onto a nearby bench, the full weight of Blake's manipulation hitting me like a truck. "But that's not all," Mom continued, her voice breaking. "Emma figured out that Blake had been intercepting our communications with you for months, maybe even years. He'd been deleting our texts to you and your texts to us. He created fake conversations to make it look like we didn't care about your achievements and you didn't care about us." "What are you talking about? Remember when you won that design award last year? You texted us about it and we never responded." "You never responded because you didn't care," I said, the old hurt rising in my throat. "We never got the message, Madison. Blake deleted it. And when we texted you congratulations about getting the promotion at work, you never responded to us." I never got any congratulations text. The pieces were falling into place, and the picture they formed was more horrifying than I'd imagined. Blake hadn't just chosen my wedding date for his engagement party. He'd been systematically sabotaging my relationship with my parents for years. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because Emma confronted Blake in front of everyone at the party. She'd found the fake text chains on his phone, found evidence of him deleting messages between us. When she realized what he'd done, she told everyone at the party that she couldn't marry someone capable of such cruelty. She called off the engagement right there." "Where's Blake now?" "He left. Just walked out after Emma exposed everything." "Madison, we need to see you. We need to apologize and explain." "I'm in the middle of my wedding reception," I said, the surreal nature of the conversation hitting me. "The wedding you didn't come to because you believed I didn't want you there. We know, and we'll never forgive ourselves. But please, can we meet you somewhere tonight? Tomorrow? We need to make this right." I gave them the address of our hotel and told them they could meet us in the lobby after the reception ended. When I walked back inside, Ryan took one look at my face and immediately came over. "What happened?" I told him everything. About Blake's years of manipulation, about the fake text messages, about how my family had genuinely believed I didn't want them in my life. "Jesus Christ," Ryan said, running his hands through his hair. "Maddie, this is sociopathic behavior. Blake has been gaslighting your entire family for years." I don't know how to feel, I admitted. Part of me is relieved that they didn't just abandon me, but part of me is furious that they believed Blake's lies so easily. Why didn't they just call me directly? Why didn't they question it when I supposedly sent messages that didn't sound like me? Because Blake is manipulative, Ryan said. And because, unfortunately, his lies probably played into their existing guilt about how they'd treated you growing up. We decided to meet my family at 11 p.m. in the hotel lobby. The rest of our reception passed in a blur. I was physically present but mentally preparing for what might be the most important conversation of my life. At 11:15, my parents walked into the hotel lobby looking more devastated than I'd ever seen them. Blake wasn't with them, and when I asked where he was, Dad just shook his head. We don't know. He left the party after Emma exposed everything and hasn't answered our calls. We found a quiet corner of the lobby, and for the next hour, my parents laid out the full extent of Blake's manipulation. It was worse than I'd imagined. For the past 3 years, Blake had been intercepting almost all communication between me and my parents. When I texted them about work achievements, relationship milestones, or just random life updates, Blake would delete the messages before they saw them. When they tried to reach out to me, Blake would delete their messages from my phone. But it wasn't just deletion. Blake had been actively creating fake conversations to drive wedges between us. He showed us screenshots of you calling us overbearing and embarrassing, Mom said through tears. He said you told him you were glad to be done with our family's small-town mentality now that you were successful in Los Angeles. I never said any of those things. I would never say things like that about you. We know that now, Dad said. But at the time, combined with how distant you'd become, it seemed plausible. I became distant because you stopped responding to my calls and messages, I said. Because every conversation felt one-sided. Because I felt like you didn't care about my life. We thought you didn't care about ours, Mom said. Blake told us you'd said that our family dinners were boring and our stories about work and local news were beneath your intellectual level now. The cruelty of Blake's manipulation was staggering. He'd created a perfect storm of mutual hurt and misunderstanding, then fed off the chaos he'd created. But the wedding, I said. How did Blake convince you not to come to my wedding? He told us you'd uninvited us, Dad said. He showed us fake text messages from you saying that Ryan's family thought we were too working class for their crowd, and that you'd decided it would be better if we didn't attend. He said you were embarrassed by us, Mom added. That you told Ryan's parents we were uneducated and might not fit in with their social circle. Ryan's parents are the kindest, most down-to-earth people I know, I said. They were excited to meet you. They kept asking when they'd get to see you at family dinners. Blake told us that too was fake, that Ryan's family was just being polite, Dad said. I sat back in my chair, overwhelmed by the scope of Blake's lies. But why? Why would he do this to me? To all of us? My parents exchanged a look I'd never seen before, a look of real shame and recognition. Because, Mom said quietly, we made Blake think he had to be the center of attention to be loved. And when you started building your own successful life, when you found Ryan and his family who celebrated you the way we should have been celebrating you all along, Blake couldn't handle it. He couldn't stand the idea of you being happy without him being the star of the show, Dad added. So he decided to isolate you from us, make sure you'd never have the family support that might threaten his position. Where is Blake now? I asked. We don't know, Mom said. After Emma called off the engagement and told everyone what he'd done, he just left. He packed some clothes and disappeared. His roommate says he hasn't been home. I felt a mixture of anger, sadness, and something that might have been relief. Blake was gone, but the damage he'd done would take years to repair. I need you to understand something, I said, looking directly at both my parents. Even before Blake's manipulation, you weren't great parents to me. You consistently favored him over me, dismissed my achievements, and made me feel invisible in my own family. Blake's lies worked because they played into patterns that already existed. Both of them nodded, tears streaming down their faces. You're right, Dad said. We failed you long before Blake started manipulating us. We got so caught up in Blake's charisma and achievements that we neglected to celebrate yours. That's on us, not on Blake. We want to do better, Mom said. We want to earn your forgiveness and build a real relationship with you. But we understand if you can't trust us right now. I looked at my parents, really looked at them, maybe for the first time as an adult. They looked smaller somehow, diminished by their guilt and shame, but they also looked genuine in their remorse in a way I'd never seen before. "I can't forgive you tonight," I said honestly. "This is going to take time. Therapy, probably. Real work on understanding how we got here and how to build something different going forward." "Anything," Mom said immediately. "We'll do anything." "And Blake," I said, "when he comes back, because he will come back eventually, I need you to understand that I won't have him in my life anymore. What he did wasn't sibling rivalry or jealousy. It was systematic psychological abuse designed to isolate me from my family. That's not something I can ever forgive." "We understand," Dad said. "Blake needs professional help, and until he gets it and makes genuine amends, he won't be welcome in our house either." We talked until almost 2 a.m., laying out ground rules for how we might begin to rebuild our relationship. It wasn't a magical reconciliation. There was too much hurt and too many years of dysfunction for that. But it was a start. Ryan, who had been waiting patiently in our hotel room, held me as I cried that night. They weren't entirely tears of sadness, though. Mixed in with the grief and anger was something that felt like hope. "Do you think we can fix this?" I asked him. "I think," he said carefully, "that people can change if they really want to, and they're willing to do the work. But you don't owe them forgiveness just because they're your family. You get to set the pace and the boundaries." "I know, for the first time in my life, I felt like they actually saw me, like they understood what they'd done wrong." "That's a start," Ryan said, "but actions are going to matter more than words going forward." The next morning, as we prepared to leave for our honeymoon in Greece, I got a text from Marcus. "How are you doing, sister?" Last night looked intense. Sister. I'd gained a brother-in-law who called me sister, parents-in-law who celebrated my existence, and a husband who would never let me question my worth again. Even if my original family never got their act together, I wasn't alone anymore. But something told me this story wasn't over yet. 3 days into our honeymoon, as Ryan and I were having dinner at a restaurant overlooking the Aegean Sea, I got a call from my mother. "Madison, I'm sorry to bother you on your honeymoon, but Blake came home." My stomach immediately knotted. "What happened?" He's not well, honey. Emma's rejection really broke something in him, and realizing that everyone knows what he did, he's not handling it well." "Mom, that's not my problem to solve." I know, but he's asking to talk to you. He says he wants to apologize." "Absolutely not." "Madison." "No, Mom. Blake spent years systematically destroying my relationships and my sense of reality. He doesn't get to apologize and make himself feel better. He gets to live with the consequences of his choices." "But he's family." "So am I interrupted. "And he chose to treat me like an enemy for years. I'm not sacrificing my peace of mind or my honeymoon to make Blake feel better about the mess he created." There was a long pause before Mom spoke again. "You're right, I'm sorry for even asking. Enjoy your honeymoon, sweetheart. We love you." After I hung up, Ryan reached across the table and took my hand. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Proud of myself, actually. 6 months ago, I would have felt guilty for saying no. I would have probably cut our honeymoon short to rush home and play family therapist. And now? Now I know that setting boundaries isn't cruel, it's necessary." We spent the rest of our 2-week honeymoon exploring Greek islands, eating incredible food, and talking about our future together. For the first time in my adult life, I felt completely free from the weight of my family's dysfunction. But the real test came when we returned home. My parents had started individual therapy, just like they'd promised. Mom called me every Sunday, not to talk about Blake or family drama, but to actually ask about my life. She wanted to know about my latest design projects, about how Ryan and I were settling into married life, about the small everyday things she'd never bothered to learn about before. "I bought one of those succulents you mentioned loving," she told me during one of our calls. "I thought maybe you could teach me how to take care of it when you visit next month." It was such a small thing, but it represented something bigger. Her genuine effort to connect with me as I actually was, not as the dutiful daughter she'd expected me to be. Dad started sending me articles about graphic design trends and new software releases. Not because he was trying to manage my career, but because he was trying to understand what I did for a living. After 29 years, my father was finally showing interest in my work. The progress wasn't linear, There were still moments when old patterns would resurface. When Mom would start to say something about Blake before catching herself, or when Dad would make assumptions about what I wanted instead of asking me directly. But the difference was that now, when I pointed out these behaviors, they listened instead of getting defensive. Blake, meanwhile, had apparently moved to Portland without telling anyone. He'd quit his job, broken his lease, and disappeared with only a brief text to our parents saying he needed time to figure himself out. Part of me wondered if I should feel sorry for him. He'd lost his fiancée, his family's trust, and his entire support system in a single night. But every time I started to feel sympathy, I reminded myself of the years he'd spent systematically isolating me from my family. Blake's consequences were the direct result of Blake's choices. 6 months after our wedding, Ryan and I decided to host Thanksgiving at our apartment. It was going to be small, just my parents, Ryan's family, and a few close friends who didn't have family nearby. I was nervous about having my parents and Ryan's parents in the same room for an extended period. What if the conversation was awkward? What if they didn't get along? What if Blake's name came up? But from the moment my parents walked in, Ellen Walsh was immediately warm and welcoming. "Catherine and David," she exclaimed, hugging them both like old friends. "We've been so excited to finally meet you properly. Madison talks about you all the time." That was a kind exaggeration. I mentioned my parents occasionally, usually in the context of our ongoing therapy work. But it set the right tone for the evening. Over dinner, I watched my father and Michael bond over their shared love of woodworking. My mother and Ellen discovered they both volunteered at animal shelters. Marcus regaled everyone with stories from his Marine days that had my dad laughing harder than I'd seen in years. "Madison," my mother said as we were cleaning up after dinner, "Ryan's family is wonderful. They're exactly the kind of people I hoped you'd find." "They accepted me from day one," I said. "Even when my own family wasn't around to see who I'd become." Mom's face fell slightly. "We missed so many years of really knowing you, didn't we?" "Yeah, you did. But we're working on building something new now. I just wish," she started, then stopped herself. "No, I'm not going to say I wish Blake were here. What I wish is that I'd been a better mother to both of you from the beginning. Maybe then none of this would have happened." It was the most accountable thing she'd ever said to me. "We can't change the past," I said, "but we can decide what the future looks like." That night, after everyone had gone home and Ryan and I were lying in bed, I felt something I hadn't felt since I was a very young child. I felt like I belonged in my family. Not because I'd earned my place by being perfect or accomplishing enough to deserve their attention, but because they were finally making space for me as I actually was. "How are you feeling?" Ryan asked. Probably the 100th time he'd asked me that question since we'd gotten married. "Grateful," I said. "Grateful for you, grateful for your family, and surprisingly, grateful for the hard road that led us here. Even grateful for Blake's manipulation." I thought about it. Grateful might be too strong a word, but I'm grateful for what came after. I'm grateful that the truth came out. I'm grateful that my parents were willing to face what they'd done wrong and work to change it. And Blake? Blake made his choices. I hope he finds a way to get help and become a better person, but that's not my responsibility anymore. A year after our wedding, I got a call I'd been half expecting and half dreading. "Madison," Mom said, her voice careful and measured in a way that immediately put me on alert. "Blake called." My stomach dropped. "What did he want?" "He's been in therapy in Portland. He says he's ready to apologize to you properly and ask for your forgiveness." "Mom." I told him I'd pass along the message, but that I couldn't make any promises about whether you'd want to talk to him, she continued quickly. "And I want you to know that Dad and I support whatever decision you make. If you never want to see or speak to Blake again, we understand completely." I appreciated that she'd said that, but I could hear the hope in her voice. Hope that maybe, eventually, our family could be whole again. "What did his therapist say?" I asked. "Blake says his therapist thinks he has something called narcissistic personality disorder with some antisocial traits. He's been working on understanding why he did what he did and learning to take responsibility without expecting forgiveness." That sounded promising, but I'd learned to be skeptical of Blake's claims about himself. "I'm not ready," I said. "Maybe someday, but not now. I'm finally in a good place with you and Dad, and I'm not willing to risk that progress." "That's completely understandable," Mom said. "I'll let Blake know that you received his message, but you're not ready to engage with him right now. And Mom, if Blake keeps pushing for contact or tries to manipulate you into pressuring me, that's going to be a problem for our relationship too. Understood. Your well-being comes first. 6 months later, Blake tried again. This time, he sent a letter through my parents. 10 pages of what appeared to be genuine accountability, detailed descriptions of his therapy work, and a request not for forgiveness, but simply for the chance to apologize in person. I showed the letter to Ryan and to Dr. Martinez, who I'd started seeing again to work through my complex feelings about family reconciliation. What do you think? I asked Dr. Martinez. I think that's a question only you can answer, she said. But I will say this. You're in a much stronger place now than you were 2 years ago. You have firm boundaries, a strong support system, and a clear understanding of your own worth. If you decide to hear Blake out, it would be from a position of strength, not desperation. And if he hasn't really changed, then you'll see that quickly and you'll have the tools to protect yourself. After weeks of consideration, I decided to meet Blake in a neutral location with my therapist present, not because I was ready to forgive him or welcome him back into my life, but because I wanted to hear what he had to say and finally close that chapter of my story on my own terms. The meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday afternoon in Dr. Martinez's office. Blake flew down from Portland, and my parents offered to drive him, but I requested that he come alone. When Blake walked into that office, I barely recognized him. He'd lost weight, his hair was shorter, and something about his entire demeanor was different. The confident, charismatic presence that had defined him his entire life was gone, replaced by something that looked like genuine humility. "Madison," he said quietly, not attempting to hug me or even shake my hand. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." For the next 2 hours, Blake laid out the most comprehensive apology I'd ever heard from another human being. He detailed every manipulation he could remember, explained his thought processes at the time, and took full responsibility for the damage he'd caused. "I was terrified that if you were happy and successful without needing our family's approval, Mom and Dad would realize how empty I was inside," he said. "I thought if I could isolate you from them, I could keep being the golden child forever. So you decided to destroy my relationships and my sense of reality." "Yes, and I'm not asking you to forgive me for that, because it's unforgivable. I'm just asking you to know that I understand what I did was evil, and I'm committed to making sure I never hurt anyone like that again." "What does that commitment look like?" "Therapy twice a week for the foreseeable future. Medication for the personality disorder. I've cut contact with anyone who enabled my behavior or made excuses for me. I moved away from everyone we know so I couldn't fall back into old patterns. And Emma," his face crumpled slightly, "Emma wants nothing to do with me, and I don't blame her. I've written her a letter apologizing, but I haven't sent it because she has every right to never hear from me again. Losing her was the consequence that finally made me realize what I'd become." "Do you expect forgiveness from me?" I asked directly. "No," he said without hesitation. "I hope for it someday, maybe years from now, if I can prove that I've genuinely changed. But I don't expect it, and I don't think I deserve it." "Good. Because I'm not ready to forgive you, and I may never be." "I understand. And I want you to know that regardless of whether I ever forgive you, you will never have the kind of access to my life that you had before. I will never trust you with my personal information, my relationships, or my emotional well-being again." "I understand that too." We sat in silence for several minutes before Dr. Martinez asked if there was anything else I wanted to say. "Actually, yes," I said, surprising myself. "Blake, for years, I wondered what I had done to make you hate me so much. I thought maybe I was too sensitive, too needy, too jealous of your success. But sitting here now, I realize that your behavior toward me was never about me at all. It was about your own insecurities and your own empty places." Blake nodded, tears streaming down his face. "That doesn't excuse what you did," I continued. "But it helps me understand that I didn't deserve it. I was never your enemy, even though you treated me like one." "You were never my enemy," he agreed. "You were my sister, and I should have protected you instead of hurting you." After the session ended, Blake didn't ask for my phone number or suggest future contact. He simply said, "Thank you for hearing me out, Madison. I hope someday I can earn the right to be your brother again." As I watched him walk away, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, I wasn't ready for that yet, but a kind of peace. The scared, angry part of me that had been carrying around Blake's cruelty for years finally felt like it could start to let go. That evening, Ryan and I went to dinner with my parents. It was something we'd started doing monthly, regular, low-key visits that helped us continue building our new relationship. "How did it go today?" Mom asked gently. "It went well," I said. "Blake seems genuine in his remorse, and he's clearly done a lot of work on himself. But I'm not ready for a relationship with him." "That's perfectly reasonable," Dad said. "We're proud of you for even being willing to hear him out." "I did it for me, not for him," I said. "I needed to see if he'd really changed, and I needed to say some things to him that I've been carrying around for years. And now? Now I feel like I can finally close that chapter and focus on the future." 2 years after our wedding, Ryan and I decided to renew our vows. Not because anything was wrong with our marriage, but because we wanted to celebrate our second anniversary by doing our wedding again, with all the people who should have been there the first time. We planned a small ceremony in the backyard of Ryan's parents' house in Boston, followed by a barbecue with about 30 of our closest family and friends. This time, my parents were not only invited, they were actively involved in the planning. Mom helped me pick out a new dress, a simple white sundress that was perfect for a backyard celebration. And Dad worked with Michael to build a beautiful arch covered in climbing roses. Jessica, who had spent the past 2 years earning back my trust through consistent actions and genuine accountability for her betrayal, asked if she could be my maid of honor again. "Are you sure you want me to have that role after what I did?" she asked. "People make mistakes," I said. "What matters is what they do afterward. You've shown me that you're trustworthy again." The ceremony was everything our original wedding had been, but with the added joy of having my whole chosen family present. When Ryan's grandfather officiated the vow renewal and pronounced us still husband and wife, everyone cheered like it was the first time. During the reception, Marcus stood up to make a toast. 2 years ago, I had the honor of stepping in as Maddie's maid of honor when she needed family the most, he said, raising his beer. Today, I'm proud to see her surrounded by all the people who love her exactly as she is. That's what family is supposed to look like. Later that evening, as we were cleaning up, my mother pulled me aside. "Madison, I want you to know that watching you build this life, this family, this community of people who celebrate you, it's taught me so much about what love should look like. Thanks, Mom. And I want to apologize again for all the years I didn't celebrate you properly. You deserve so much better from me." "We're building something better now," I said. "That's what matters." As Ryan and I drove back to our hotel that night, I reflected on how much had changed in 2 years. I had a relationship with my parents that was based on mutual respect and genuine interest in each other's lives. I had a chosen family that showed up for me consistently and unconditionally. I had a husband who saw my worth and celebrated it daily. "Any regrets?" Ryan asked, probably reading my contemplative mood. "About what?" "About giving your family a second chance. About doing the hard work of rebuilding those relationships." I thought about it. No regrets. Even if it hadn't worked out, even if they hadn't been willing to change, I would have known that I tried. But I'm glad it did work out. "Me too. I love seeing you happy with your family." "All of my family," I corrected. "Blood family and chosen family." 6 months later, Ryan and I found out I was pregnant. When we decided to share the news with our families, I realized that for the first time in my adult life, I was excited to tell my parents something important, knowing they would actually be excited for me. We planned a family dinner at our house, both sets of parents, Marcus and Jessica, and told everyone together. The response was everything I'd dreamed of as a child. My mother cried happy tears. My father immediately started talking about building a crib. Ellen started planning a baby shower. Michael began researching the best car seats. "This baby is going to be so loved," Jessica said, squeezing my hand. As I looked around the table at all these people who genuinely cared about me and were genuinely excited about this new chapter in my life, I felt overwhelming gratitude for the journey that had brought me here. Yes, it had been painful. Yes, there had been betrayal and heartbreak and years of feeling like I wasn't enough. But all of that had led me to this moment, surrounded by people who loved me unconditionally and about to bring a child into a family that would never make them question their worth. "What are you thinking about?" Ryan asked later as we were getting ready for bed. "I'm thinking about how grateful I am that Blake's manipulation finally came to light," I said. Not grateful that it happened, but grateful that the truth came out when it did. Why? Because if it had stayed hidden, I might have spent my whole life thinking my family just didn't love me enough. I might have passed that pain on to our kids. Instead, we got to rebuild everything from the ground up. And now our child will grow up in a family that actually knows how to love each other. And Blake? I hadn't heard from Blake in over a year, though my parents occasionally mentioned that he was still in therapy and still living quietly in Portland. I hope Blake finds peace, I said. But more than that, I hope he never hurts anyone else the way he hurt me. And I'm grateful that his actions ultimately led to something beautiful, a family that actually works. As I fell asleep that night, my hand resting on my still flat belly, I thought about the story I would someday tell my child about family. Not the fairy tale version where everyone loves each other perfectly from the beginning, but the real version where love is a choice you make every day, where family is built through actions, not blood, and where sometimes the most beautiful relationships come from the hardest work. I would tell them that they are wanted, celebrated, and enough exactly as they are. I would tell them that their worth doesn't depend on anyone else's ability to see it. And I would make sure they never, ever have to wonder if they belong in their own family. Because that's what real love looks like. Not perfect, but persistent. Not easy, but intentional. Not guaranteed, but worth fighting for. And if you're reading this and you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever wondered why your achievements don't seem to matter as much as everyone else's, if you've ever felt like you're competing for love that should be freely given, I want you to know that it's not your fault. You deserve to be celebrated. You deserve to have people show up for your important moments. You deserve unconditional love. And if your blood family can't give you that, you have permission to build your own family with people who can. Because at the end of the day, family isn't about who shares your DNA. It's about who shows up when it matters most. Trust me on this one. I learned it the hard way, but I learned it completely. And now, if you'll excuse me, I have a baby room to start planning with a family that actually knows how to love each other. The end.